I've been to St. Petersburg just the one time, and that for just a week. Invited along on a tour of the palaces that the settings you're about to see were created from. And I had no idea that that week would haunt my thoughts forever after. For that one incredible week, I walked the streets of St. Petersburg awestruck, seeing the things for the first time that the people who live there get to see all the time. It was just slightly less than 300 years ago that Tsar of Russia, Peter the Great, decided he wanted a city built on the flatlands where the Neva River empties into the Gulf of Finland. A city that since its inception has always given place to the arts. Fine musicians, painters, poets, grand architecture. And not far away, in the edge of the hills that ring the Neva River plain where the city is, escapes were built for the members of the imperial court and their administrators and attendants. Palaces, as beautiful, if not more grand, than the castles and palaces of the kinsmen of the Romanovs who ruled other European countries. Peter the Great had visited Versailles and wanted something better. This is it, Peterhof, Versailles of the North. Its grace matches the grace of the city nearby, St. Petersburg, Venice of the North. So called because it's spread over the islands of the Neva River, with each island connected and yet separated at the same time by granite-encased canals, topped by beautiful bridges with individual names and personalities. Well, needless to say, I found St. Petersburg to be enchanting. Many of its 5 million population may not see it as I saw it, but it's always there for them. It was brand new for me. And I wonder, do they realize what a treasure they're living in, this the seat of Russian culture, where their children play nonchalantly in St. Petersburg's parks in the midst of monumental elegance? Do they who see it every day even see the magnificent works of art that adorn St. Petersburg's streets? Statues from mythology or of heroes or rulers, even a few left of Lenin, whose name was given to the city for most of the 20th century, Leningrad, giving him an honor that even Peter the Great, who founded the town, didn't take. St. Petersburg was named for St. Peter of the Bible, disciple of Christ, not for Peter the Great. But if there was humility exercised in the naming of St. Petersburg, it was overcome in the building of the grand palaces, Peterhof, begun by Peter himself. It was completed to its present form by Peter's daughter, Empress Elizabeth. The most striking feature of this palace has to be the grand cascade, the fountains. Peter designed their hydraulics. The water is piped in from the hills some 11 miles away. The fountain's pressure doesn't come from pumps, but from gravity. Peter's wife, Catherine I, wanted a little place of her own. Daughter, Empress Elizabeth, eventually built this from what her mother started. The Catherine Palace, located out from St. Petersburg at Tsarskoye Selo, the Tsar's village. A later Catherine, the one we're a little more familiar with, Catherine the Great, sort of adopted the Catherine Palace as her favorite and finished it out, remodeling the apartments like the blue formal sitting room. You'll see this room's twin in a few minutes. Another room you'll see that is also associated closely with Catherine the Great is the Yellow Hall, or the banqueting hall recreated from what is known as the Catherine Block at Peterhof. The Catherine Block is a segment of buildings where Catherine the Great was under more or less house arrest until her unpopular husband was removed from power and she was anointed Tsarina of all the Russias. Well, Catherine the Great evidently needed a variety of places to call home. She also had the Gatchina Palace built. Gatchina is bleak and almost fortress-like. The later Romanovs huddled here in the waning years of their rule, lulled by Gatchina's deceptive safety. Catherine the Great's son, Paul, had the throne room added to Gatchina. This throne room is another recreation you'll see later. Paul was Catherine the Great's favorite son, and she had Pavlovsk Palace built for him. Paul's wife, Maria, had the lantern study at Pavlovsk built. Lantern refers to the bay window effect employed in the room. Remember, St. Petersburg is only 10 degrees south of the Arctic Circle, and although twilight lasts all night for a few evenings in summer, its winters are cold and dark, and lantern windows were designed to gather in as much light as possible. The lantern study is on your tour today. Well, the wealth of the Romanovs goes without saying. Just look at the elaborate appointments in their palaces. Gold and jewels and precious minerals like lapis lazuli, amber, and malachite. And while we make ring settings from such stones, they made columns and furniture from them. We almost lost St. Petersburg. Hitler ordered it wiped from the face of the earth in the Second World War. His troops surrounded the city and laid siege to it for 900 days. For nearly 3 years, Peter City on the Neva took pounding after pounding but was never breached. But the palaces in the outlying hills were almost lost of the ages. Gaping holes were blown to the sky through their ceilings, floors were blasted out, fires humbled the dwellings of the czars. But while the Russian men were holding off the invaders, the Russian women came to the palaces and wrapped and carefully packed away as many of the priceless pieces of art as possible and shipped them off in rail cars to Siberia, well out of harm's reach until the war was over, until they could be safely returned to the palaces from whence they came. Many of these objects would have been lost forever had it not been for the Russian women who would not let them be taken. However, many of the hand-carved, carefully gold-leafed figures that once adorned the walls and ceilings of the palaces were lost to the ravages of the war. But some of these objects have been and still are being recreated from bits and pieces of the originals or from photographs of them. But not everything has been remade, even in the 50 years since the end of the war. Some of the works you'll see today are reproductions commissioned by and created especially for this exhibition. Objects of art whose originals have been lost from the palaces for decades. These new restorations are being displayed here first, then they will be returned to Russia to become a part of the permanent collections and treasures of the palaces after the Jackson exhibition closes. I've promised myself I'll go back to St. Petersburg again someday and see the palaces in the hills and experience again what you are about to experience a taste of. Russia at its cultural zenith, when the arts abounded, when cost was no object for the czars, when fairy lands were constructed for the rulers to live in to keep them from being bored to tears with the tedium of court life, and to see what's left of the dreams of people like Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, who saw to it that St. Petersburg would always be a city of wonderment and greatness, a place that one can never leave, in thought anyway, and it's waiting for you just through the doors before you.